2005. Maria del Carmen Garcia was waiting for the bus when the man who had violated her daughter smirked and asked,
"How's your daughter?"
That's when she decided to take her revenge in the most shocking way ever, by setting him on fire. These are 10 parents who took revenge too far. Number 10. Gary Plauché. March 16, 1984, disguised with a baseball cap and sunglasses, Gary Plauché waited anxiously at the airport, his hand constantly checking that gun in his pocket. And the second he saw the police escorting the man who had kidnapped and assaulted his son out of the airport, he pulled that gun out and shot him in the head, right in front of the cameras. Before all this unfolded, Gary had led a pretty ordinary life with his small yet content family. He worked as an equipment salesman and also doubled as a cameraman for a local news station. Then one day, everything changed. February 19, 1984, Gary's son, Jody, was on his way to routine karate practice when his instructor, Jeff Doucet, offered to take him for a quick ride. Jody's mom, June, didn't think twice about it. After all, Doucet was a trusted community member and had been teaching karate to their kids for a while. But what June didn't know is Doucet had ulterior motives. Instead of a short joyride, he took Jody on a bus to the West Coast. Along the way, Doucet decided to change their appearances. He would shave his beard and dye Jody's blonde hair black, hoping to deceive anyone looking for him. They ended up in a rundown motel near Disneyland in Anaheim, California. And inside that motel room, Doucet did something absolutely sickening. He took advantage of poor Jody, his own student. Now just try to put yourself in Jody's shoes. Despite that, the kid found the guts to ask Doucet if he could call his parents. And surprisingly, Doucet actually let him. Jody's parents wasted no time and immediately alerted the police. They traced the call and managed to apprehend Doucet. Meanwhile, Jody was put on a flight back home to Louisiana, finally safe from his captor. Now, despite finding his son, Gary here couldn't shake off the rage he was feeling. He spent the next few days held up in a local bar, asking anyone when Doucet was going to be brought back to Louisiana for trial. By sheer luck, a former WBRZ news colleague was there and told Gary that Doucet would be flown in at 9:08 a.m. the following day. Gary heard this and immediately started making arrangements to confront this person. Disguised with a baseball cap and sunglasses, he entered the arrivals hall, concealing his face. He noticed the WBRZ crew preparing their cameras to capture the moment when Jeff Doucet would be escorted off the plane by a caravan of cops. As Doucet was taken through the airport, he passed that news crew who were taping the scene. He would walk right past Plauché, who took out his handgun and fired at the right side of his head point-blank range. The WBRZ crew was able to capture that chilling moment on camera, and that footage has now received over 20 million views on YouTube. In the video, we see Doucet suddenly collapsing while a police officer tackles Plauché against the wall. Amidst the chaos, the officer, who happened to be friends with Plauché, yelled at him, urging him to explain what he just did. Through tears, Plauché responded,
"If someone did this to your kid, you'd do the same."
Gary was given a 7-year suspended sentence, with 5 years probation and 300 hours of community service, receiving no time in prison. Number 9. Barry Gilton and Lupe Marcato. July 2012, Barry and his partner Lupe were faced with a parent's worst nightmare. Their daughter, Letitia, was being abused by a pimp named Calvin Sneed. Letitia moved to LA at 17 and became involved with Sneed, who initially pretended to be in a romantic relationship with her. However, he soon resorted to threats and violence to keep her trapped in the world of prostitution. Barry and Lupe were devastated when they discovered the horrifying truth about what Sneed had done to their daughter. They tried to convince Letitia to return home to San Francisco, but she refused to leave Sneed's clutches. Frustrated and fearing for their daughter's safety, Barry made a life-altering decision. He reached out to his cousin, Antonio Gilton, and his friend, Alfonso Williams, both members of the Central Divisadero Players, or CDP, a prominent gang in the district. He sought their help to eliminate Sneed once and for all. June 4th, 2012. Sneed was on his way back to pick up Letitia Out of nowhere, an SUV pulled up next to his car, and the people inside were armed with at least 2 guns. Chaos ensued when they started unloading at his car, causing Sneed to lose control of the Corolla and crash into this parked car. He was pronounced dead at the scene. Gilton and Williams were sentenced to 22 and 25 years in prison, respectively, after pleading guilty to the racketeering charge and admitting to participating in Sneed's murder. Barry and Lupe were also arrested and charged with murder. However, they were acquitted of murder, but convicted of racketeering conspiracy. Now, their story continues to serve as a powerful reminder that there are no limits to what a parent will do to ensure their child's safety. And the next parent on our list wholeheartedly agrees with this. Number 8. Sarah Sands.
This is 32-year-old Sarah Sands. In a few moments' time, she will stab a man to death with a knife that she is carrying underneath her clothing.
November 28, 2014. Sarah grabbed a knife and stabbed her neighbor 8 times in Canning Town, East London. What led her to commit that drastic act? Well, it turns out that her neighbor, Michael Pleasted, had a quite dark past. He had 24 previous convictions for sexual offenses spanning over 3 decades. Now, he had served time in prison for those heinous crimes, but that's not all. He was also abusing Sarah's own son. Now, for quite some time, Sarah had no reason not to trust her older neighbor, who she enjoyed chatting to and cooking meals for, and thought it'd be a good way for one of her sons to earn some pocket money when Michael offered her young boy a job in his shop. But everything changed when she found out that Pleasted had been accused of molesting 2 boys and was on bail awaiting trial. Police were investigating a further allegation that he had abused a 3rd boy. So after more digging, Sarah also found out Mike changed his name from Robin Molt to cover up those previous crimes, which were a string of convictions for sexually assaulting boys between 1970 and 1991. He also served time ranging from 9 months to 6 years, and before the fresh allegations emerged, Michael had become a well-known community member running a bric-a-brac shop. When Sarah found out about this, she was terrified that he had harmed her son. However, when she asked him if anything had happened, he denied it, of course. Unfortunately, that denial didn't last for long. November 2014, her son broke down and admitted that he had been groomed and abused. Sarah was horrified and decided to confront Michael. Later at her trial, Sarah sobbed in the witness box, as she insisted she didn't mean to hurt Pleasted when she went to his apartment on that night of the killing after drinking a bottle of brandy. She told jurors that she had gone to reason with him so he can admit to his crimes and spare his young accusers from having to go to court. But when Michael answered the door, he ignored her request and just smirked, as he told her the boys were all liars who had ruined his life. That's when she snapped, stabbing him 8 times. After realizing what she had done, she called the police and turned herself in. She was convicted of manslaughter on the grounds that she had lost control rather than murder and was sentenced to 3.5 years in prison. However, that sentence was later increased to 7.5 years by the Court of Appeal judges in London, who deemed it to be too lenient. 2018, Sarah was released after serving nearly 4 years in jail, and is now campaigning for a tightening of the rules on sex offenders being allowed to change their names. In an interview, she said,
"I did what any mother would do, because he did this to my son, my little boy. I never dreamt I'd be capable. I have no pride in it, but at least I know he can't hurt anyone else."
Number 7. Maria del Carmen Garcia. June 13, 2005. Maria was waiting for the bus in Benajutar, Spain. It was a regular day, until the man who had violated her daughter unexpectedly crossed paths with her. He dared to ask her,
"How's your daughter?"
The anger inside Garcia was so intense that she couldn't find the words to respond. However, that night, she decided to confront them in a way that nobody would have imagined. October 17, 1998, everything started when Garcia asked her daughter, Veronica, to go buy some bread. It was then that her neighbor, Antonio Cosme, approached Veronica, grabbed her by the shirt, put a knife to her neck, and forcibly took her to a nearby forest. It would be here that he would assault her. 2 years later, Antonio Cosme was sentenced to 9 years in prison. On the day he met Garcia, he decided to try his luck by going to the city, thanks to a prison permit. He had thought about having a drink, meeting up with friends, and then going back to the prison. However, this never happened. As Cosme walked towards a local bar, Garcia made a change of plans, redirecting toward her house. There she grabbed some matches and a plastic bottle, then headed to a nearby gas pump, filled that bottle with fuel before making her way to where Cosme was. Meanwhile, at the bar, Cosme was talking and drinking with another person. When Garcia walked in, the owner of the bar sensed something was off and stood in her way. She assured him she just wanted to talk to Antonio before shoving him to the side and continuing toward him. Before anybody could react, she took out that bottle and began spraying gasoline all over his head, yelling,
"So you don't forget me."
She then threw a match at him and watched as the man bursted into flames. While everybody was watching this horror, she ran out of the bar, but was later arrested that same night. 1 week after the incident, Antonio died at the hospital due to the severity of those burns, which affected about 60% of his body. Due to this, Maria was sentenced in 2010 to 9.5 years in prison by the provincial court. Several people initially criticized her actions, saying maybe she went too far. Others would say she's a murderer, but some saw her as a hero. The same kind of thing happens with our next parent. Number 6. Paramjit Singh. 2016. A father in India felt the law's punishment wasn't enough for the man who had harmed his daughter. So he decided to take matters into his own hands, making sure that perpetrator was truly held accountable for his crimes. Paraminder Singh, a 17-year-old, faced accusations of molesting Paramjit Singh's daughter after getting caught in the act by the child's mother. April 19, 2016. After a court hearing, Paramjit Singh publicly declared his intentions to forgive Parminder and settle the matter outside of court. However, his idea of settling was far beyond anyone's wildest imagination. Paramjit offered to drive Paraminder to their village on his motorbike. Sensing no danger, Paraminder agreed. However, during that journey, Paramjit abruptly stopped that bike and launched a brutal attack on him. Then, after he was all black and blue, he would tie him to a tree and use a machete to sever his hands. Paramjit quickly escaped from that scene, leaving Parminder alone by a canal, bleeding and nearly unconscious. Local residents discovered that teen and alerted the police, who rushed him to the hospital. Although the doctors managed to stabilize him, his hands couldn't be saved. The following day, Paramjit was arrested and charged with attempted murder. During questioning, he admitted to premeditating that crime, having brought a rope and a sharp weapon with him. This revelation sparked a fiery debate surrounding the case. Supporters would argue his actions were driven by his anguish and frustration with the justice system's failure to protect his daughter. On the other hand, critics emphasized the importance of maintaining the rule of law. Which brings us to this case, which was even a greater shock, as the perpetrator of this heinous crime, deserving punishment from an enraged parent, was a member of law enforcement. Number 5. Paul Bender. 1995. The judge's order to ex-cop Robert Selman was clear: stay away from Officer Jill Bender or go to jail for harassment. Now, her father, Paul Bender, however, wasn't satisfied and decided to dish out his own justice. In his younger days, Paul had served his city with distinction and had been one of Brooklyn's finest cops. Setting a great example for his children, they also joined the same profession. However, despite knowing that they were accomplished and capable of looking after themselves, Paul still worried about him, especially his daughter Jill, who was having some problems at work, and Paul knew instinctively that something was wrong. Jill finally gave in and told her father that a fellow officer named Robert Selman was stalking her. Robert Selman worked at the same office as Jill, and he developed a strong interest for her. Over time, that interest turned into this unhealthy obsession. Despite Jill's repeated rejections, Selman's infatuation only grew stronger. Jill filed a complaint accusing him of harassment, sometimes hanging up, other times playing music into the answering machine, and standing outside, staring into her windows. Selman was eventually arrested on harassment charges. However, the judge released him without bail on the condition that he'd stay away from Jill. Around that same time, Selman was involved in a severe car accident, leaving him with serious injuries. He was granted a few weeks off of work to recover, but when that time was up, Selman refused to return. As a result, he was fired for defying his superior's orders. So, with nothing left to lose, Selman disregarded the court's orders and resumed harassing Jill. At this point, Paul, Jill's father, had had enough. He decided to meet up with Selman in an attempt to reason with him. Paul went over to his apartment, but the details of their encounter remain unclear. However, it ended with Paul shooting Selman. When the police got to the scene, they discovered Selman's lifeless body. He'd been shot 6 times. Just a few blocks away, the police also found Paul's lifeless body. The man had suffered massive heart failure and passed away. According to those who knew him, Paul Bender was a calm guy, someone who took pride in his actions and showed respect to others. So considering that he dedicated most of his life to upholding the law, the burden of taking matters into his own hands must have been overwhelming for him, causing him to lose his life. Number 4. Kimberly Cunningham. October 2003. After Kimberly found out that her daughter had been sexually assaulted by her uncle, Coy Hundley, nearly 5 years ago, she was compelled to do the unthinkable. Kim got into her car and drove over to the tool company where Hundley worked. She called him out into the parking lot. Kimberly was praying he would deny the assault. Instead, Hundley laughed at her. So driven by anger, Kim shot him 5 times, reloaded the weapon, and fired 5 more. Witnesses said that after she shot him, she got back into her car and calmly drove away. 45 minutes later, she was in the Alcoa, Tennessee Police Department turning herself in. August 2003, before all that happened, Kimberly had obtained a gun permit, taking lessons at a firing range, and carried a loaded gun in a black purse in her car ever since she learned that Hundley's eldest son had allegedly molested her son Shane. After Kimberly reported that to the police, Coy Hundley, her sister's husband, threatened her. So feeling helpless and angry, she smashed the windows of Hundley's son's car. When she called Hundley at work, he told her that the vandalism made the two families even. Things calmed down for a bit after that incident, but little did Kimberly know that her daughter, Amanda, was hiding an even darker secret. Kimberly began noticing that her daughter, a straight-A student, had become lethargic and withdrawn. Amanda sometimes would lie on the floor outside her bedroom door, screaming and crying until her mother would let her come in and sleep with her in bed. Kimberly continued pressing, but Amanda couldn't bring herself to tell her mother everything. But one night, while Kimberly was putting Shane to bed, Amanda asked her to come into her bedroom. She said that she had something she wanted to talk about, and that's when she told her all about what Coy was doing to her. Finally, it made all sense to Kimberly. As Amanda got dressed for school, her mother slowly absorbed the enormity of what her daughter had told her. By the time Amanda did get to school, Coy lay dead in the parking lot, with 4 bullets in his head and 4 more scattered throughout his body. October 2005, the jury acquitted Kimberly of second-degree murder, but found her guilty of voluntary manslaughter. But it was later reduced on appeal to 6 months. Number 3. Ellie Nesler. April 2nd, 1993. Ellie confronted Daniel Mark Driver, a Christian camp employee, in the courtroom of the Jamestown Justice Court. In this intense moment, she would fire many rounds at his head and neck. Driver faced accusations of sexually abusing 5 boys, including Nesler's son William. During that trial, it was shown that years earlier, Driver had pled guilty to multiple counts of molesting minors in the San Jose area. However, he had been placed on probation after the judge received numerous letters from members of Driver's church attesting to his character. Ellie was praised by some as a protective mother who felt compelled to take action faced with the idea of her traumatized son testifying against Driver in court. But many others criticized her for disregarding the legal system. Nevertheless, the sympathetic image of Nesler presented by her defense team began to crumble shortly after committing the crime. Tests would reveal Nesler was under the influence of methamphetamine at that time of the shooting. Additionally, coming to light is her criminal record, having been convicted of auto theft at the age of 18 and serving several months in the California Youth Authority facility. Despite telling state investigators that she had contemplated killing Driver over 2 years before the shooting, Nesler pled not guilty by reason of insanity. Eventually, she was convicted on a lesser charge of voluntary manslaughter. She received a 10-year prison sentence, but her conviction was overturned on appeal due to juror misconduct. As a result, she was released after serving only 3 years. Ellie Nesler passed away at the age of 56. And you know what? Ellie wasn't the only parent who chose to seek revenge in a courtroom. Number 2. Marianne Bachmeier. March 6, 1981. In a German courtroom, Marianne pulled out her pistol and fired 8 rounds at Klaus Grabowski, the man on trial for killing her daughter. Marianne Bachmeier was a victim of sexual assault herself, and as a result, she had her first child at 16, but had to give the baby up for adoption as an infant. At 18, she became pregnant yet again, and her second child was also placed for adoption as an infant. Bachmeier was assaulted again shortly before the birth of her second child. But when she finally had her third child, Anna, Marianne was determined to keep her, and for some years things were going really well for her and her daughter. She was living with Anna in West Germany and was running a pub in Lupe. But one incident changed everything. May 5th, 1980, following a heated argument with her mom, Anna decided to skip school, unknowingly setting a chain of events off that would shatter both their lives. Anna was kidnapped by Klaus Grabowski, their 35-year-old neighbor, who had a criminal record involving child molestation. Grabowski kept Anna at his home for hours before finally strangling her with some pantyhose. He then hid that body in a cardboard box and left it on the bank of a nearby canal. That same evening, Grabowski's fiancée called the cops, leading to his arrest. While he confessed to the murder, he denied any abuse towards Anna. Instead, he provided this strange and disturbing story. He said he strangled Anna because she tried to blackmail him. Grabowski claims she tried to seduce him, threatening to tell her mom that he had molested her if he didn't give her money. Marianne was furious when she heard this story. A year later, when Grabowski went on trial for the murder, she finally sought her revenge to prevent him from trying to tarnish her daughter's legacy. Witnesses said Marianne made incriminating remarks after shooting Grabowski. According to Judge Gunther Kroger, who spoke to her after she shot him in the back, she heard the grieving mother say,
"I wanted to kill him."
Marianne allegedly continued,
"He killed my daughter. I wanted to shoot him in the face, but I shot him in the back. I hope he's dead."
2 policemen also stated that they heard Bachmeier call Grabowski a pig after shooting him. And so, not long after, the victim's mother found herself standing trial for murder. During this trial, Marianne testified that she had dreamt of shooting Grabowski. A doctor who examined her asked for a handwriting sample, to which Marianne responded by writing,
"I did it for you, Anna."
Decorating that sample with 7 hearts, possibly symbolizing her daughter's age. Marianne later explained that she had heard Grabowski's allegations that her daughter was attempting to blackmail him. She said,
"I thought now comes the next lie about this victim who was my child."
This incident pushed Marianne into the eye of a public storm. Her trial gained international attention due to her ruthless act of vengeance. Decades later, a friend who was featured in a documentary about the case claimed to have seen Marianne practicing shooting targets with a gun in the basement of her pub before the shooting incident. 1983, the court finally found Marianne guilty of premeditated manslaughter and sentenced her to 6 years in prison. Marianne Bachmeier would be released after serving only half of that sentence. September 17, 1996, Marianne passed away at the age of 46. She was laid to rest next to Anna. And number 1, Andrei Bamberski. July 9, 1982. Kalinka Bamberski was spending what was supposed to be a happy and relaxing summer vacation with her mom and stepfather in Lindau, Germany. That evening, Kalinka was injected with cobalt ferlicet, violated, and later murdered in cold blood. The perpetrator of this heinous crime was none other than her stepfather, Dieter Krumbach, who was at the time a prestigious doctor. The autopsy conducted 2 days later couldn't establish a cause of death. Nevertheless, they did find aspirated stomach contents in her airway and lungs, undigested contents in the stomach, several injection marks, fresh blood stains around her private parts, and a whitish substance on the internal genitals. However, the substance wasn't tested, and her genitals were removed and have been missing ever since. Sounds like they were trying to hide something. As you could imagine, the only person benefiting from this was Kronbach himself. It makes even more sense when you hear that he was actually present at the autopsy. Kronbach was only questioned once by the police, during which he admitted he injected Kalinka with a tanning compound to help her get that sun-kissed glow that she always wanted, and that he slipped her a sleeping pill that same night. It was publicized later that he had also injected her with many other substances, including a dangerous combination of dopamine and isoptin. Kalinka's biological father, Andrei Bamberski, was living in France at the time of his daughter's death. He was destroyed with this news and just couldn't believe his daughter had died of natural causes. He asked to see her autopsy report, but it took 3 months before Bamberski was sent that report. By then, the local prosecutor in the Lindau region had closed the case, and an official inquest had concluded there was no foul play involved in Kalinka's death. Bamberski pressed for another investigation. He was certain that his daughter had been assaulted and murdered, and that the authorities were letting a powerful predator walk free. Additional investigations were ordered in Germany, but they led nowhere. Refusing to give up, Andrei began distributing leaflets in Lindau, accusing Kronbach of assaulting and murdering his daughter. He would also hire this well-known lawyer to press for a trial against Kronbach. However, the case ended when the higher regional court in Munich decided that there was insufficient evidence proving Kronbach's injection negligently or intentionally caused the girl's death. Despite that, Bamberski was determined to bring Kronbach down no matter what. And so he continued his quest for justice. Following intense lobbying by Andrei, French forensic experts established the cobalt iron injection as the cause of Kalinka's death. Kronbach was found guilty, but Germany refused to extradite him. The French Ministry of Law also refused to issue an international warrant. By that point, Kronbach already had an eyebrow-raising history. His first wife died rather suddenly, and he was also found guilty of drugging and assaulting a female patient. Yet Kronbach never saw the inside of a cell. He received a mere slap on the wrist, a suspended sentence, and a ban from practicing medicine for 2 years. All of this made Bamberski more determined than ever to make him pay for his crimes. October 18, 2009. Andrei took drastic measures to make sure that would happen. He orchestrated the kidnapping of Kronbach from Germany, arranging for him to be transported to France. Kronbach was tied and dropped off near a police station for French cops to arrest him. Ultimately, he was convicted 2 years later and received a sentence of 15 years. Bamberski must have been relieved that justice had finally been served, despite having to face the consequences of his actions. 2014, Andrei went on trial for kidnapping and was handed a 1-year suspended jail sentence. In the end, you can bet that this was definitely a price he was willing to pay. His story's a powerful testament to the extraordinary lengths a father is willing to go to for his children.